So today's agenda, we will be starting off with Envision News, our objectives, and then go into our primary content. And then we will have a Q&A section, like I mentioned previously, and then we will do a wrap up at the end. And then I would like to pass the mic on to my colleague, John.
Thanks, Mongshi. I'm John Burton, and I'm part of the Envision communications team. And I like to phrase myself as being a freshly minted and impassioned CHW ally. I come from a traditional marketing background, so my time working in public health has been short. The last 2.5 years have been with Envision, which has enlightened me to the importance and value that CHWs provide, as well as CHW Allies. So I'm particularly interested and excited, more than usual, for today's webinar. Before we dive into the content, which we're all anticipating, I want to take a minute to talk a little bit about Envision. We are Envision. Most of you know who we are by now. If you don't, and even if you do, I want to encourage you to go visit our website. We did an upgrade in late July, and there are many new features that some of you may not be aware of. But on the website, you can learn more about our mission, be introduced to the entire team, communicate with us, leave feedback. There is a calendar of events that are not only Envision related, but also allies and other agencies that we are aware of who are having events that we think you should know about. Next slide, please. But one of the two things I really want to elevate in the next minute is our resource library. The resource library was put up in late July and was a huge lift by the entire team. And it has right now close to 100 different resources available. And we've broken them down to 8 categories. And they offer resources, like 11 different types of resources. I jotted them down just because I forget some of them, like PDFs, videos, webinars, workshops, podcasts, toolkits, blog posts, articles, trainings, case studies, and other websites. And we keep adding to it. So we're at 100 now, and it just keeps growing. There's also the option in the library for you to submit a resource to us should you have something that you find of particular value, and that might be of interest to your peers, other CHWs, other allies. So that's on there as well. There's also a little video to navigate the resource library should you find it complicated. We'd like to think that we nailed the design and that it's easy to get through, but you tell us if it isn't. So the other thing that I want to elevate is My Envision. And My Envision is a space that we created alongside, but different from the resource library. I'd say that because it launched at the same time. And it's a space that we created that is not part of the website, that is specifically for CHWs, allies, and recipients to connect, share, gain support, and build community. This link will take you to a page on our website that will explain further what it is and the few easy steps it takes to join My Envision. There are currently 350 members there, and I encourage you to join and the conversations that are going on there and the sharing that's going on there. If you've already joined and you haven't been back, please come back and engage with the community that is happening within there. Both of these things we built for you. Both of these things we did to help elevate the CHW workforce and the allies that help all of us do the important work that we do. So not just for myself, but the entire Envision team, I encourage you to use these resources and make them a part of your daily life. And thanks for doing what you do. Now back to Mongshi.
Thank you, John. And we're so glad to have you as an ally for So today's objectives, we're going to be focusing on how to identify several important components of CHW allyship and the reasons allies are key to CHW workforce advancement. And we're also looking to identify strategies for becoming a strong ally and identifying current and potential allies and strengths for strategies for forming and nurturing these relationships. Next slide, please. With that, it is my pleasure to transition to our primary content for today's meeting. And I would like to introduce you all to our panel here. We have Lisa Renee Holderby-Fox, who is actually co-director of Envision, and most importantly, she's a CHW. And then we have Gail Hirsch, who is an independent consultant from Massachusetts, joining us today as an ally. And then we have Catherine Gray Hayward, who is the Executive Director of Louisiana Community Health Outreach Network. And again, most importantly, she's a CHW. And then we have Ashley Winterstorm, who is Associate Professor at the Louisiana State University School of Public Health, Director of Louisiana Community Health Worker Institute, and also the Director for the Center of Healthcare Value and Equity at the Louisiana State University School of Medicine. So please welcome our panelists, and today's content is going to be structured as like a panel discussion as well too. So my colleague Monique and I will be facilitating some of the questions that we are going to be asking our panelists today. So first off, I would like to ask my first question to Lisa Renee and Gail. Or actually, you know what? I would like Gail and Lisa Renee to come off of mute and introduce themselves before I ask them the question. So please come off of mute, and Gail and Lisa Renee, y'all could introduce yourself really quickly.
Okay, hi. So I'm Gail Hirsch. I was the director of the Office of Community Health Workers at the Massachusetts Department of Public Health for close to 30 years. I recently retired, and in that capacity, I served as an ally and champion to community health workers in Massachusetts, working for many years with Lisa Renee. So we're pairing up to do this together.
Hi all, I am Lisa Renee Holderby Fox, a longtime community health worker. I'm based in Georgia now, but I've done most of my work in Massachusetts. So I've had the pleasure of working a lot with Gail. I was also the first executive director of the Massachusetts Association of Community Health Workers. And so a lot of what we're going to share around allyship and what worked, some of the things that worked in Massachusetts will be based on my time as a CHW there, as well as the ED of Machwa. And today I am, as Mungshi said, one of the co-directors for Envision.
Thank you so much. So my first question for the two of you is, what does allyship mean to you?
Who's going first?
You know,
okay, so I get, you're gonna go ahead.
Sure. So I can start. And there's just a couple of things that I want to share around this. You know, when we think of allies in general, we think of people working together for a common cause. And I just want to elevate that CHW allies are no different, right? CHW allies are working with CHWs around a common goal. And in this case, it's oftentimes promoting the CHW workforce and sustaining the CHW workforce. So I just wanted to level set with that comment, Gail, and just acknowledge that, you know, allies have a special role in working very closely with CHWs.
Yeah, I mean, I did a lot of thinking, obviously, about this to get ready for this, and it's exactly the same thing. That I think some of our sort of initial and ongoing work together centered around identifying what were the common goals that we had, and clearly, community health workers and public health have a common goal or many common goals. So I think that in creating a common vision and giving us a sort of a blueprint for where we wanted to go, and, you know, making priorities and goals and then identifying like steps together, that actually sort of laid the groundwork for so many of the steps we took together, and it also it illuminated sort of the fact that that this work, advancing this community health worker work, needs diverse partners. And so one of the things I learned, one of the many things I learned from Lisa Renee was around how to see who might be another potential ally. So it wasn't just, you know, it was not certainly just her and me. There were plenty of other people, but much of the work that we did was in that partnership of being within a state government agency, and then being in the Community Health Worker Association. But when the work started, I didn't know what a community health worker was, and I actually discovered that I was an ally because community health workers brought to my attention that I had the potential, where I sat at the Department of Public Health, to advance the workforce. And then from then on, my job as an ally was to listen. And that's a big piece of what I did, was to listen. And then I started to learn. And that it involves really being quiet for a while, so that because sometimes CHWs don't necessarily find their voice or know that they're community health workers. And I'm talking about close to 30 years ago. So we were all muddling through. We were making our way by walking it together.
Gail, I just wanted to add and really elevate, the role of allies to really assist CHWs to maximize our potential and really nurture a lot of our professional growth. People have often heard me say, and I'm going to say it here publicly, Gail, that, Gail saw a lot of things in me that I didn't necessarily see in myself. And she helped to nurture some of those things, nurture my leadership skills, so that I could then speak up at meetings. I could then sit at tables where some decisions were being made about our workforce. And so I just want to elevate that allies just have a really special role. And, as CHWs, we need to acknowledge that. And as allies, you all need to embrace that.
And I just can't let the opportunity go by without saying that exactly the same. That is, whatever you just said, Lisa Renee, it was the same for me. You brought me to tables. You nurtured my voice. You nurtured my potential. And part of my reflection on this topic is that I would not have the career that I had. I had a 30-year career in public health based on being a CHW ally that I didn't even know about until I met community health workers. So this was so mutual. If you seek mutuality, you have to intentionally look for opportunities to listen, to be respectful, and to listen. This is what I'm saying. I didn't know what it was like to work as a community health worker. It was only community health workers could tell me. And then I took it on myself within state government to actually use whatever ability I had within a state agency to just always speak up within every place that I was. Every single opportunity is a teachable moment. And that's a big piece of advancing the work. It's educating everybody in addition to me and Lisa Renee. Now there's hundreds of people on this webinar who is a community health worker, and why community health workers are so important.
Gail, if I could just add, we're speaking a lot and focusing a lot on our relationship as CHW and allies. But again, I just want to elevate for folks who are on the webinar today that, it wasn't just Gail and Lisa Renee, right? There were a cadre of CHWs, a cadre of other allies that really assisted to bring this work forward and assist in some of the accomplishments that we've all had together.
Thank you so much for that answer for the both of you. So my next question is, can you tell me a little bit about how your partnership came together? And then you all kind of talked about that a little bit, but I think going into more specific would be so we could show the audience like how you were able to build that relationship with one another.
This will be interesting. What are you going to say, Lisa? How did the partnership come together?
You know, it's interesting, Gil. I've given this a lot of thought. And I think the first thing I would say is that it was very organic. You know, it wasn't that, you know, I stood up and said, hey, I'm a CHW over here. And Gail said, I'm an ally over here, and let's come together and do some work. And it was also being in similar spaces very early on. You know, I know some folks have heard me share this story, but I'm going to share it again here really quickly. You know, I went to my first meeting of the Massachusetts Association of Community Health Workers. We were a network then, not yet an association. And I kept getting an invite to this meeting, and I kept throwing it away because I had other things to do. And the invite came again the following month. I threw it away. And, you know, finally I went to this meeting. I was blown away, realized this was the space I needed to be in. And Gail was also in that same space. And we realized collectively with, like I said, lots of other folks that it was really important for CHWs to have, at the time, a peer network, a place to come together, learn from each other. And we really and truly began our partnership at that first meeting that I went to. I left that meeting as part of a steering committee to help move the network forward. And Gail was also a member. And, you know, just working together to build the Association of Massachusetts, I think, created a space for us to really and truly begin to collaborate both on an organizational and an individual level to promote the workforce. So that's what I would say, Gail.
Yeah, that's good. And I would say that my role as an ally began even before I met Lisa Renee. Because I was involved in the formation of the Massachusetts Community Health Worker Network before I met Lisa Renee, but what happened was when Lisa Renee joined the very beginnings of the network, she had I saw fire in the belly, and it was exciting. And so I just kind of said, okay, let's go, you know, and there a lot of stars lined up, you know, there was funding, there were allies, there were supporters, but I think sort of a common through line was that in many intentional ways, we articulated a vision, and that vision again sort of was the North Star, was the pole star, whatever you call it. I think we spent a lot of time listening to each other and developing each other's articulating each other's sort of what our roles could be in the vision. I can't emphasize Lisa Renee's creativity enough. And I think it comes from being a community health worker. I mean, it comes from being who she is, but I think, you know, this was the creativity involved in being a community health worker can advance this relationship with allies exponentially. So I would just say that.
Gail, I'm going to add one more thing before we're asked another question by Mungshi. I just wanted to elevate that, you know, the funding or the seed funding for the network was a result of a grant that Gail wrote. And when she wrote that grant, she was really intentional about the need to have CHW leadership in the development of a network. And so I just wanted to elevate that, Gail, because that's an important piece to this whole equation, right? That early on, you realized if you were going to support this effort as an ally, there were things you could do, i.e. write the grant, et cetera, but that you needed to do this hand in hand with CHWs.
Yeah, and that was a lesson I learned early on from, amongst others, Jarrell, Lisa Renee's husband, that the whole purpose of creating a CHW association was to have community health workers leading it. That's why it was created, so that there would be CHW voice. So basically, I was in a position to write a grant. I had support from the health department, and I got lucky enough to get that grant, and then things kind of took off. So I don't know if this sort of hopefully this illuminates a little bit about the quality of the relationship, which I think is so important to think about when we think about what allyship means, because it is completely relationship based. It's about mutual respect and listening and eye on the prize. We always said that, eye on the prize, and I think yeah, hopefully so far that has been inspiring or illuminating.
Thank you so much for your answers. So now my last question for the two of you is what have been some of the major accomplishments that you two have achieved together as CHW Ally team?
Oh. Well, I don't know. Do you want to go first, Lisa Renee? I always feel better if you go first, because again, my role has always been, and I've always felt that my role is to not go first. My role is to, to play whatever follow-up or something like that. So and Lisa Renee has graciously sort of filled that leadership role for me. So I don't know, are you willing to go ahead and talk about some of our achievements together?
Sure, I'll do that, Gail. I'm smiling so hard because I was going to tip it to you first, but you have just so graciously elevated why it's really important sometimes for the CHWs to, or all the time for the CHWs to lead, and when it's important for allies to kind of step up or take a slight step back. So I'll start, and then please fill in all of the gaps. I think one of the largest achievements that we've had is really, creating common vision, right? And again, not just Gail and I, but in partnership with other CHWs and other allies. Started with a really small group of us, and then that group kind of expanded. I would also say, again, not just Gail and I, but we were definitely very engaged in the work, was creating the Massachusetts Association of Community Health Workers. I think that without the partnership, I'm not convinced that the association would have taken off when it did and as it did. You'll hear a little bit more about some of the national work that we've done together later on, so I'm going to hold on to that one. Really actively, intentionally, and thoughtfully building CHW leadership, right? It takes a village of CHWs to move forward some of the work. And it takes a village of allies to nurture some of the CHWs. What else? Strategic partnerships and new allies, really thinking outside of the box as we did this, not only with state and local health departments, funders, CDC, I would also say policymakers and legislators have come in handy as achievements. We've been able to pass legislation successfully in Massachusetts, CHW legislation. And just educate. As Gail said, we started this journey together many years ago, but we're still spending lots of time educating who CHWs are. But I think it's still an accomplishment because so many more folks know who CHWs are, what we do, what we bring to public health and healthcare, that's an achievement as well. Gail, I'm going to stop there.
Yeah, I mean, that's it just feels like a drop. You know, it's vast, but it feels like a drop, because when I think about all the things that we did together that were part of the puzzle pieces of advancing the workforce in Massachusetts, it's just so phenomenal. There were, you know, it's over 20 years worth of work together. It involved co-writing, co-drafting legislation. It involved me sort of learning to adopt some of Lisa Renee's mantras of, you know, if you don't know if you don't ask. Okay. And just learning there's a certain kind of credibility that comes with being a community health worker, of what's real, that often is not. State health departments, and I'm only speaking for state health departments, can be quite, you know, esoteric, academic, bureaucratic, hierarchical. And Lisa Renee helped me sort of fight that. I'll say, I'll just be very sort of forthright and say, within the organization, if there were requests for information from community health workers, or needs expressed about the workforce, if we went together to talk to people, then people listened to her, and then I sat there. So I mean, but then it became important that then people began to recognize that the work that I was doing within the state health department was important, and that it all ripples out. I mean, I noticed that somebody noted in the chat that if you don't know if you don't ask. I have so many quotes from Lisa Renee about, like, not backing, that I should just fill the chat with them, about not backing down, and about I mean, I can't tell. There is so much, and the last slide in this deck is a picture of us all sitting around schmoozing with the governor of Massachusetts. Okay, this was a meeting that Lisa and I called up the governor and said, community health workers are important. Can we come meet with you? So here we are. Like, you know, I would have never been able to do that. And you can see Lisa Renee over on the right there. This is a long time ago. It's 10 years ago now at this point. But basically, that isn't just an example of the many things that in partnership we were able to do at the state level and at the national level. And a big piece of this, just as backdrop, was that we were also working together within some national context. So it was one hand sort of, you know, holds the other, basically. And so, but I could see amongst my colleagues within the state health department, they didn't understand. They weren't in the community. What I learned from Lisa Renee and the other community health workers is just how important it is just to be out in the community. And so Lisa Renee dragged me everywhere, and I went happily, because that's where I had the opportunity to learn, and always look for an opportunity within my parameters of what I could do, and not let any opportunity go untapped.
So Gail, I just wanted to add just one comment to that. You know, Gail just shared that this is, you know, a group of us sitting with the former governor of Massachusetts, and he was an ally. He is still an ally for CHWs. And I didn't know that, right? But having conversation with him, we realized he was an ally. And so I want to elevate that to say that sometimes folks that we don't know or don't realize are allies. right? And we just need to tap into their allyship to continue to promote the workforce.
Yeah, thank you so much for all of those great, I think, perspective that not a lot of folks are aware of. And that's one of the things I really love is you both have a lot of knowledge on this type of work and really elevating some of those particular perspectives that folks aren't really aware of when it comes to the CHW workforce. So thank you so much, Lisa, Renee, and Gail. I know we're going to come back to the two of you again, but I would like to pass the mic over to Monique into facilitating the questions for Catherine and Ashley.
All right, thank you, Munshi. Hello, all. I am Monique Allen. I am the Community of Practice Lead with Envision and also a community health worker. And I will be asking the questions for Catherine and Ashley. So question number one, we're going to ask the same questions. What does CHW allyship mean to you? And either one can start.
You know, I wrote something down and then I rewrote it. But anyway, I just feel that it's allyship means for me, it's working with. I hear something. Okay, I thought that was me. Working with somebody who's, and I heard these words. So Lisa and Gail, don't worry about it. You said it, but elevates and wants to elevate community health worker, and that person is not a community health worker, right? I think working with Ashley has, Gail said working with Lisa Renee brought her here, here, and here. Well, I'm gonna say, as Ashley as the ally brought me here, here, and here. I was a community health worker for 35 plus years. I never thought that I would be doing some of the things that I am doing now. And I have to be honest, if it wasn't for her, half of the people I have met, half of the organizations that I am working with, I would not be there. And again, yes, there are other allies and other, so it's not just a two of us, but for me in the beginning, Ashley was it, because I'm not clear how many allies community health workers had at that time. I don't know, right? But she's always been an ally. And what she was saying, well, I'm not a CHW, but okay, stick that butt out there, that's okay. But she's a great help, right? She's a friend, she's a great help. And I'm gonna tell y'all one last thing. Between the two of us, I think we work well together because her personality is so soft, blah, blah, and blah. When mine comes out like, hey, let me tell you, that's me. So we work well together because it kind of evens, I don't know if I even her off, but it helps me to not go off sometimes on people, right? So yeah, having an ally is a wonderful thing. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're
And
welcome.
Ashley.
All right, Catherine got me cracking up already, as usual. Well, hi, everybody. It's great to be here again. My name is Ashley Warner-Strong. I work at LSU Health. I apologize. My voice is interesting today, we'll just say. So I'm sorry, I'm a little scratchy in my throat, but I'll try to get through it. Yeah, so it's an interesting question to answer what it means to be an ally. I was thinking about this a lot. One thing that comes to my mind is, very much what's been said already, which is just really about working collaboratively with community health workers and the CHW workforce in the way that they want to advance the agenda that's important for them and for their communities. And thinking about that and some of the work that Catherine and I have done over the last 13 years together, I had a very, very, very different vision initially of where I thought the CHW workforce should go in our state of Louisiana. And so I had to step back and learn a lot of things. So I think just really embracing what CHWs want and supporting that is an important piece of allyship. I would say another piece is just always remembering not to speak for the workforce. I have people ask me all the time because they think I'm quote unquote expert in CHWs. Oh, what should we do about CHWs and whatever. And I always say, I don't know. We need to ask CHWs. I can't speak for them. So sometimes we talk about making sure that CHWs have a seat at the table, which is certainly important when we think about decision-making tables and places where, important decisions are being made. But more importantly, I like to think about helping community health workers build a table and make sure that they are sort of at the center of power, that they're the ones who are really making decisions for themselves. And I think the other thing that I often say and have to remind myself and think is really important is that allyship isn't something that's guaranteed. It's not forever. So I often say I'll be a CHW ally as long as CHWs think I am. But if I start doing things that my colleagues who are CHWs, especially Catherine, don't like, then I'm thrown out, right? So it's very much like a relationship. It is a relationship that has to be worked at and maintained. So we don't just get to be allies one day because we say we are, but rather because we do our best to show up for the workforce and work collaboratively in partnership.
Okay, sorry to interrupt, but Ashley, can you slow down for our interpreters for a bit?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you both for those responses. And so we'll go to our next question here. So can you both tell us about how your partnership came about and came together?
I was invited to a meeting, community health workers. So I was invited to this meeting that I attended, and Ashley was there, and she actually was running this meeting, right? I had never met her before in my life, right? But from there, it seems that our relationship, our partnership continued, right? We moved forward. We then, with help from some others, not just the two of us, but for help from some others, we founded LaShawn, Louisiana Community Health Outreach Network together, and we have been working at it for the last 13 years. So that's how it happened. From this really small meeting with only about 8 other women there, no men. I don't know where they were, because we have them as community health workers, but it was great. So yeah.
Yeah, I can add a little to that, and I'll try to speak more slowly. Y'all yell at me if I speak too fast. So from my perspective, it was kind of interesting. Catherine and I were each working at the same university, totally different departments. We didn't even know each other. And I happened to be working, well, I should go way back, which is I was very, very lucky to go to school at University of Arizona, School of Public Health, where they had an incredible background in community health in general, but a lot of local partnerships with community health workers. So it was there back in the early 2000s that I learned about community health workers in general, and that sort of blew my mind, and I knew I was excited about community health workers. I moved back to New Orleans in 2008, which was a few years after Hurricane Katrina happened, and happened to be working on a mental health focused project that was a community academic partnership based at a university, where we were trying to build local mental health service delivery capacity. And one piece of what we were doing is we were training what we at the time called outreach workers, and how to do health education and outreach for folks who are experiencing depression and anxiety after the hurricane, which was a lot of folks in New Orleans at that time, as I'm sure you can imagine. But in any case, part of what we did is we had monthly meetings for community health workers every month, where we would bring folks together and ask them, kind of how they were doing with this new mental health outreach role and what was going on. And the project lasted for a couple of years. And at the end of the project, we decided, sort of asked and said, gosh, we've got all these community health workers coming together every month. Is this worth continuing to do? And this was about the time that Catherine got involved. So, she was at one of these meetings. And folks said, yeah, why don't we keep having these meetings every month and see what happens? And so we did. And Catherine, being a longtime CHW, in the community, sort of knew everybody. And she started inviting other people and saying, oh, well, who should be here? I know Dana Feast is working on breast cancer. Let's get her involved. And I know Renee Jenkins over here. And suddenly we had, you know, a larger group of people, and then we needed a new space. And Catherine said, oh, hey, I have space at Women with a Vision, which is a nonprofit organization that she had founded years before. And so it was because Catherine was there, she was able to start pulling in other people, and we were able to start developing this network. And I mentioned before, I had a very different vision. I thought that this was going to be sort of a group that was going to really focus heavily on advocacy. I thought we would get together and figure out, you know, how we wanted to change policy and change laws specific to community health. But Catherine and the other community health workers said, no, we need a place to, Catherine, what's the word you always say? No, you're on mute. You're on mute, Catherine.
We actually needed a place to vent about our work and about our supervisors and, you know, just overall venting so we could get it out and then continue on with our work.
Yeah, and so we focused on that, right? And so it became a professional association. Like, that was not at all what I thought was going to happen, but I had to step back and, you know, take my agenda out of it. Anyway, so that's kind of how we started working together. And yeah, that was back in 2010, I think, 2011.
Yes, 2010, something like that.
It's been a hot minute.
Thank you both. And I heard some accomplishments in that, but our third question is, what have been some of the major accomplishments that you have achieved as CHW Ally team? So I've heard some stuff, but is there anything else that you feel are your great accomplishments together?
We have a couple, but I'm gonna let Ashley go. Some great accomplishments, yes.
You're making me go?
Yes.
All right, well, let's see here. We have several. So one is that we co-developed our community health worker training program. So we have at this point the only program in the state that's recognized as a community health worker core competency training program. So for many, many years now, we have collaboratively trained CHWs. We used to do it in person, but in the pandemic, we transitioned it to online basically overnight, which felt like a huge feat. It's not the most ideal scenario for training CHWs, but we managed to do it. And I don't even know the number offhand, but Catherine, we've probably trained, what, 250 people or so since the pandemic started?
Yes, something like that, if not a few more.
Yeah, maybe close to 300 at this point, so a lot. So I think that's been a proud accomplishment. I would say just the work that Catherine has done to develop LaShawn into its own organization. And just to be clear, we say LaShawn, and sometimes people think that's the name of a person, but that's the Louisiana Community Health Outreach Network. Just establishing that as its own, you know, 501c3 nonprofit, I think was huge. It's important to understand that when we started our little monthly meetings, we didn't know where we were going to go. We didn't have a clear vision for how we were going to turn into a professional association, but you know, we didn't have permission, we didn't have funding. We just decided to go for it. And, you know, with Catherine's leadership, we were able to establish the organization. I would say another important accomplishment was developing a really nice partnership with our local Office of Public Health. I believe it was back in about 2015, they came to us, and I remember I got a phone call. I was standing in my bathroom getting ready for work, and my phone rang, and I answered it, and it was our colleague Colleen Arsenault from the Office of Public Health, and she said, hey, you know what, we just got some funds from the CDC to support community health workers, and we're going to start a CHW certification program, and we're going to do training, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. And I feel like one of my jobs as an ally is to politely say no sometimes. So I said, I don't think so. Have you asked CHWs about that? And she was like, no, that's a good idea. So I introduced her to Catherine, and she was wonderful, and she listened, and, you know, sort of, we were able to bring her into this idea of like being a true ally. And she ended up being able to help support with funding from CDC, a bunch of infrastructure for LaShawn, which helped establish a website and helped establish money for salaries and all that. So that was really fun. And then similarly in, I think it was 2019, our Secretary of Health in Louisiana, who was fantastic, CHW Ally, and she was very interested in supporting CHWs, and she called us and she said, hey, we're going to certify CHWs, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. And we had the same conversation again and said, have we talked to CHWs, and decided to engage CHWs in a new way, which was that we ended up having a legislative resolution passed that created a community health worker workforce study committee that was at least half CHWs, to make sure that CHWs were kind of at the forefront and leading the work and the charge. Oh yeah, we have slides on this. It's not super important. One side note is that Catherine and I always somehow inadvertently dress alike and our colors match, as you can see in this little photo here. But in any case, the Louisiana legislature created this workforce study committee, which allowed us to study what CHWs in our state wanted in terms of training and certification and things like that. So that was really exciting. And I think on the next slide, some information about a workforce study report that we produce based on all of that information. We could skip all that because it's not super important, but we did a large workforce study together, made recommendations on what should happen for the CHW workforce in our state. And we have since turned into what's now the Louisiana Community Health Worker Workforce Coalition. I think Mengshi just put in the chat our whole huge report if you want to read that. And that was definitely done in partnership with many other CHWs and allies as well. And then our most recent stuff, we can skip to the next slide. I'll just note one thing that we're passionate about. When Catherine and I have worked on a bunch of research projects together, including this one, but whenever we do that, we always give our findings back to the community. So you can see here some sort of quick info about our study results. So those are online as well. And then on the next slide, I would say we can skip this because we don't need to get into all the details. Oh, we have Medicaid coverage for some CHW services now. That was part of our recommendation that came out of our report. It's not a perfect scenario. That's a conversation for another day if anybody wants to talk about that. But we do have some reimbursement for some CHW services in Louisiana now, which is a good start. And then on the next slide, our most recent accomplishment, I would say, is thanks to the help of another ally, our friend Stacy Roussel, who's in the middle of this picture. She works at the Louisiana Budget Project. She first and foremost, a couple years ago, maybe 3 years ago, Catherine got the Voices grant. Is that right?
Yes.
Which brought a lot of funding to LaShawn in terms of being able to expand capacity and hire staff. And then she also helped at Catherine's request create a new law. We were able to engage and when I say we, I mean not me, because I work for the state and I'm not allowed to advocate. I like my job. I am keeping it and I did not break any rules. Let that be on the record. Stacy, in her role at the Louisiana Budget Project, engaged a legislative champion to introduce a piece of legislation to create what is now the Community Health Worker Workforce Board, which will oversee training standards for CHWs in Louisiana. And LaShawn will be an important part of that. So I have now talked a lot. Catherine, what am I forgetting?
Actually, I would not have said half of that. I would have mentioned the coalition and the board. So Ashley has mentioned it all. There's nothing else for me to add to it. Yeah.
How she does me.
Well, see, look at this collaboration. Thank you both so much. And I will pass it back over to Mengshi.
Thank you, Monique. Okay, I'm gonna pin. Okay. So we have one more question. So we divided a question for the allies and a question for the CHW. So I'm going to be asking the questions for the two CHWs. So Catherine and Lisa Renee. What suggestions do you have for CHWs who are looking to engage new allies?
Make sure they're looking at the right person. That's number one, right? But on the other hand, I think they have to engage, attend meetings in order to meet people. You know, if you don't get out and meet people, you will never find the right ally, find somebody who's going to be in your corner. So there's meetings. And if you're, I'm going to tell you this, if your director, supervisor say, well, no, that's not, convince them. It is for us. It is for us to be at that table with other people so that we can meet people. We can meet people who will become our allies in the work that we're doing to help us to move forward. You know, so Lisa Renee, can you talk about reimbursement for? Yeah, I'm sorry, I was reading something. Yeah, you can talk, Lisa.
I wasn't sure if you wanted to respond to that or if we're going to hold that till the end.
That's Ashley's. Ashley's gonna answer that.
Okay, okay.
Maybe we can do questions at the end.
Yeah, okay.
Cool. Yeah, so I have a couple of different suggestions, I think, for CHWs when we're, you know, thinking about allies and who should we engage and how. You know, the one thing I want to say again, and I think I can't say it enough, we've heard it from Gail, from Ashley, Catherine, you know, that allies should be working alongside and with CHWs, not necessarily for CHWs, right? We need to be doing this work together. I would really encourage folks to think broadly and creatively about who allies are or who potential allies are. And I say that for a couple of reasons. You know, you've heard us talk about former Governor Patrick, but also, you know, we were fortunate and have had some wonderful commissioners of public health. And one of them early in his career was a CHW, right? And so, yes, he was a strong CHW ally, but I only knew that through conversation with him, right? So again, have conversations, think broadly about who could be allies. You know, don't be afraid to educate about who we are to potential allies, who we are and what our needs are for the workforce. You know, a lot of folks want to help in some way, shape, or fashion. They want to support the workforce, but you don't know what you don't know, right? And so I think it's up to us to make sure that we're educating potential allies. You know, and really start with a few allies. You know, you heard from Ashley and Catherine that a small group of folks got together, and look at LaShawn today, a smaller, not as small maybe, but a small group of folks got together in Massachusetts to form the association. So don't be afraid to start small with a couple of allies. You know, don't feel as though you've got to go out and find 20 allies right away to support the work in your home states. And, you know, lastly, I would say seek out allies. Not everyone's going to come to us, right? We might have to go to them. And we might have to go to them with a specific ask or a suggestion about how they can support the workforce. But don't be afraid to ask people and don't be afraid to seek out those who can be allies to us.
Thank you. Do the both of you have anything else to add to that question?
I actually think it's all been said. I mean, in our way, we both said to attend meetings, meet people to find out if they're allies. You know, everybody's not going to be our ally. And Lisa Renee said sometimes you have to just stop and educate people because they don't really know anything about us. So I think it's been said.
Mm-hmm. You know, I think the only other thing I would add is sometimes it's not only individuals who are going to be allies for our workforce, right? It could be organizations, could be funders, could be all kinds of folks. So I, again, would encourage folks to think broadly about who we mean and who we should seek out as allies.
Yeah, thank you for that, because I think a lot of the times folks are kind of hung up on the individual ally, but we need to focus on like, hey, what are some programs or systems that could be our allies as well too. So thank you for bringing in that perspective. Monique, would you like to ask your question
Absolutely.
for the allies?
Absolutely. So our final question for the allies, this question is, and this is for Ashley and Gail, what are some suggestions that you would have for people who are looking to become allies or be better allies?
Gail, you want to go ahead?
Well, if you're looking to become an ally, if you're really not connected to community health workers at all, then clearly the only way to become an ally is to go out there and find yourself some CHWs to become connected to and listen to. But to strengthen the position that you're in, I think that probably some of us on this in this meeting here are in that position that we're looking for more opportunities and better ways to do what we can do within our wherever we are, whatever the organization is. And I think, you know, one of the things I would say is I know it sounds like a broken record, but follow the lead of the community health workers. I was thinking about this when Lisa Renee was speaking, because and I it sort of reiterates what I said before. She dragged me to, she said, she looked at the bigger landscape and said, well, how about Health and Human Services, Region 1? What about them? Let's go try them. Okay, so we went to them. You know, she like, how about the Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts Foundation? Let's go there. How about the Boston Foundation? Let's go there. How about the head of the Joint Committee on Public Health in the legislature? Let's go there. You know, so it was a lot about following her lead. You know, again, she was extremely creative. And excuse the dog barking in the background. I'm going to try to shut the door when I get a chance. But I think, you know, it's about opening vision to embrace all the opportunities that you can have. Like when Catherine said, go to meetings. Well, that and make meetings, you know, that, and again, I learned this all from Lisa Renee. You know, you want to talk to someone, make a meeting with them, you know, just do it. And you know, and if they say no, go make a meeting with the one next to them, you know. So a lot of this was about, I think it's about being able to take advantage of the creativity that community health workers naturally have when they're advocating for their clients. They tap into all kinds of creative ideas to get the client what they need. And I think that what our role is as allies is to support them to transfer those skills to the bigger picture for the workforce, for like how it, and Lisa Renee always said this as well, so I always keep coming back to what you say. You know, a community health worker can be a community health worker for community health workers. That is, that all those fantastic natural skills that community health workers have, we can learn from them how to harness those skills in partnership, and then take them to whatever the next level is that's being articulated. What needs to happen next, and always create opportunities for to hear that, to just not assume anything, and listen. Ashley? do you want to say something?
Oh, you know me, I always have something to say. Yeah, I first, yes to everything Gail said. I'll add a few things. One place that I want to start is just, if you want to be a better ally, I cannot emphasize enough the role of just literally showing up and building trust. I know that is one of the reasons that Catherine and I have been able to work together for so long. And at this point, we can practically finish each other's sentences sometimes. We don't always prepare as well as we should for webinars because we know we can wing it, right? Because we trust each other. We know what each person brings to the table. I think that's really, really critical. I would say always be mindful of the idea that comes from our friends in the disability rights community, which is nothing about us without us. So whenever as an ally you find yourself in a situation where somebody is asking you to speak for CHWs, or you find yourself sort of moving in a direction without CHWs being there, at the proverbial table, leading things, you can remind yourself, hey, I need to make sure that CHWs are here in this space right now. I think that's really important. Also, I think part of being a good ally is just approaching the work in a way where we value everybody's lived experience and expertise. And those of you who know me hear me say this all the time, but I was lucky to have an incredible mentor who some of you may know, Loretta Jones, and she always talked about how everybody has a PhD in something, and it doesn't matter whether you get your PhD from the university or from the sidewalk. They're equally valuable. So we really just need to value everyone's expertise equally and make sure it's there. I would say also the piece about educating other stakeholders is really critical, and not just educating them about who CHWs are, but also at times politely, or maybe not so politely, depending on the situation, pushing back. And making sure that the CHW workforce is not being exploited or hurt in various types of ways. Being very careful about language. I hear people talking a lot about using CHWs, and I will always correct them and say, no, we don't use CHWs. We work with CHWs, we collaborate with. I get people who come to me a lot and want to use my CHWs on a research project, and people will literally say that, hey, I'm developing a research project, we want to use your CHWs, and I correct them on use, and I also say I don't have CHWs, I work with CHWs as long as they work with me. But just simple things like that, just really being clear about language and making sure that it's always respectful, I think is really critical. I think also being mindful of what your own skills are and what your collaborators' skills are. I heard Lisa Renee and Gail talk about, Gail wrote some grants. Well, that's because Gail's a great writer, right? So take advantage of that. That makes sense. And Lisa Renee is amazing at creating meetings and being creative about engaging people, right? So any way that you can leverage those skills is a great idea. Let's do what we're already good at. Certainly teach each other through co-mentorship and learning the other skills as well, but take advantage of the skills that you have. I think that's really critical. I think it's been mentioned, but I'll just explicitly say, just really whenever possible, building CHW leadership capacity. A lot of times CHWs may not think of themselves as leaders, but encouraging them to think of themselves in that way is really, really important. And then I think the last piece I'll just mention is I think a lot of us who either work in academic settings or maybe health departments or program management, sometimes we are trained to want to sort of get credit for our work. We want to be leaders, we want to look good, we want to present at conferences, and that's fine, but it's really important that if we're doing that in relation to work with CHWs, that we co-present, that we are really making sure that CHWs' voices are being elevated, and that when CHWs are doing the work, they should be the ones presenting the work, and they should be the ones highlighted. So just important to sort of let go of this idea of getting credit for our work, and really think about advancing the work in a more meaningful way. So I think that's it. I could go on for days. And my last thing, I'll just say, I say this all with great humility. I have screwed up a zillion ways to Sunday in being a CHW ally, and I anticipate that I will probably keep making mistakes I hope that my colleagues and friends will forgive me, and I'll keep showing up as best I can. But I don't mean to sound preachy by any means, because this is certainly a work in progress, and I think we're all learning all the time.
Thank you both for all the information and the great responses. And I will pass it back over to Mengshi.
Thank you, Monique, and thank you everyone for your answers. I know we have a little time reserved for you all to kind of highlight your national work. And I want to give you all that time to really highlight some of the things you have been doing within your state and working at a national level together to accomplish a lot of the things that we see now today in the CHW workforce. So is all open for the four of you to speak.
Mengshi, I'd like to share and kind of start with what I think was a wonderful example of CHWs and allies working together to accomplish something great. I'm hoping that everyone on the line knows that CHWs have a standard occupation classification code at the US Department of Labor. That just didn't materialize one day. It was a lot of work, a lot of collaboration between CHWs across the country and our allies to make sure that that happened. I think I shared with someone the other day, the story is that the Department of Labor had not gotten as many letters in response to a new classification code as they did when we proposed one and submitted the definition. And that's because not only CHWs were writing letters and saying why this is really important, but many of our allies across the country all wrote letters to say how important it is that CHWs have a standard occupation classification code or an SOC. So I just raised that up as one example of a time that allies and CHWs came together to really promote something for the workforce that now has ended in a classification code that is there, right? So that CHWs are recognized as a profession across the country. And I will just add that the four of us were all definitely involved in making sure that that happened as well as many others, but the four of us on the line were engaged.
Would anyone else like to add to that?
I'm not sure if we have anything to add to that. I mean, yeah, no, I don't know if I think she said it all, to be honest about it.
So I'll jump in.
Wait a
I'll
minute,
jump
Gail.
in
It's good
because
to have good speakers where you don't have to say much. They're gonna say it all. I love it. It is what it is. But you can tell, Gail.
yeah, no, so I was about to say it and then Darrell put it in the chat, which is and we were planning to anyhow talk about how we are co-founders of NACHWA, the National Association of Community Health Workers, which was just a work of heroes and heroines to kind of persevere, to come together and listen to each other and make the road by walking it, and lots of ups and downs. But I think that we are all can say that even though it's not a done deal, NACHWA is an ongoing work in progress, that we are extremely collaboratively proud of the work we did together as allies and CHWs from wherever we stood in the country, in our position, in our organizations, in our multiple hats that we all wear to try to ensure that there be a voice for community health workers nationally now and in the future, because it's something that's been needed for so long. I can't, there's no work I've done that's been more rewarding for me than to learn from community health workers and seeing this blossom in a national way is what's the best. That's I try to say these pompous things and they come out funny. Okay, Catherine,
I'll just mention one other thing really briefly too, is through the community health worker section of the American Public Health Association, CHWs and Allies have collaborated for the last, 20 plus years. It was whatever, the section hasn't been around that long, but even beforehand, folks collaborated and were able to write some policies that have been very important to supporting the workforce. One in particular includes just simply a definition of community health workers, which I know I was not involved in developing, but I know was a very difficult process to even agree on what that was. But that's kind of the foundational definition that's used in the workforce now. Just last year, there was a new policy passed about CHWs being recognized as advocates for social justice and racial equity and violence prevention. I might not be getting that title perfect, but those things are all in there, critically important. And there was also one a few years ago, I think it was passed in 2014 or 15, that focused on community health worker involvement in developing basically any kind of workforce standards. And that's the policy that we often see cited today about any entity that's making decisions about the community health worker workforce should be made up of at least half CHWs. And so that's something that, kind of laid a foundation. And then now anytime that folks are making decisions without CHWs, it's very easy for CHWs and allies to stand up and say, hey, but wait, the American Public Health Association says anybody making decisions about CHWs, or any body, I should say, should be at least half CHWs. So that's just a very quick mention, but all of those policies were written with CHWs and allies working together. And I think it's a really big deal that the American Public Health Association has so much, codified policy that really supports the workforce.
Thank you so much for all of that. I know we have like a minute for Q&A, so I would like to go back. There was a few questions on here, and I think they were really pertaining to, I think, Ashley and Catherine, your work. And if folks want to, learn more about it as well, you can also contact the two of them. But Jacqueline Stevens did have a question about the CHW training in Louisiana. She wanted to know if that training, the CHW certification, did that make them a state, will it be state certified? I hope I asked it correctly.
We're not, we don't have certification in Louisiana. We have standardized training. That was one reason we went to the legislation here in Louisiana. And there's a reason for us not having certification. I'm not gonna get into that right now, but we do give a certificate that's, let me put this out here, just as good as certification. That's my answer. Ashley might put it more professionally, but
I'll just say that based on our workforce study that I mentioned briefly that we did several years ago, we just found that there would be a lot of barriers to community health workers obtaining individual level certification. We were concerned about issues of language access, issues of potential background checks for people with histories of incarceration, issues about citizenship status, and we just realized there would be a lot of barriers, and we might be limiting really good people from becoming CHWs. And so we recommended to have standardized training instead of a formal certification.
Mm-hmm.
Mungshi, could I just add something? I'm not in Louisiana, and it's not a Louisiana specific response, but I just wanted to elevate you know, what Ashley and Catherine were just saying, also it has happened in Massachusetts and many of the other states that are making decisions around certification, but that the workforce takes the lead in those decisions. And allies can support us by ensuring that that's what happens as states are taking a look at certification for community health workers. So I just wanted to give a plug for that.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. And then there was a question from Clifford Ryan. He asked, can you talk about the reimbursement part and what that means for CHW workers? I'm thinking he's talking about the Medicaid reimbursement that you mentioned, Ashley, in your discussion.
Yeah, Catherine, do you want to answer that, or would you like me to?
No, of course I want you to answer.
It's a complicated question, so I'm going to give a simple answer since we're almost out of time. It just means that our Medicaid office has permission from federal CMS to offer reimbursement for some very limited CHW services. So CHWs who are ordered by a licensed provider, so like a physician or an advanced practice registered nurse or a PA, can provide some services like health education, health coaching to people who have an identified need. And in Louisiana, that need can be things like pregnancy, chronic condition, including behavioral health condition, and an unmet or suspected unmet social need. So then CHWs can provide services to that person, and Medicaid will pay for those services. So it's a very limited basis. And the payment is somewhat limited in terms of, you know, it's $18 per half hour roughly, so it's not a whole lot of payment. So it really only applies to CHWs who are working directly with licensed clinicians. So happy to chat about that offline if anybody wants to talk more about that in a different setting.
Okay, thank you all for that. And then the presenters had a question for the audience, which I thought was really cute. I never usually have this, but the question they have for the folks on this call is, what are you going to do to nurture the CHW allyship moving forward? And then Catherine also put that down in the chat below. So you don't really have to answer that question right now, but it's a question for you to think about as well. Because, you know, one of the things Lisa Renee always says to us is she's a processor. It takes her a while. I'm the same thing, and I'm pretty sure other folks are like that as well too. So that's a question for you all to think about moving forward after listening into this webinar and learning from these 4 individuals about CHW allyship and the importance between relationships. So before I move on, I just want to thank my 4 panelists, my 4 presenters, subject matter experts one more time for helping me and willing to say yes to me, as you know, like Lisa Renee, a short time notice, unfortunately. But I'm just so glad to have these 4 individuals sharing their information. They are really subject matter experts in CHW work and the CHW allyship. So I really encourage you all to connect with them as well too, if you all need anything pertaining to building relationships and sustaining those CHW and allyship moving forward. So thank you so much for that. And then Caitlin, can I have you share slides again? But before we leave, I just want to thank the attendees one more time for taking the time out of your day to join us today. And I cannot wait to see you all in December. So thank you all for joining us, and I hope you all have a great weekend.